Good afternoon, everyone. It is Thursday, the 28th of May, and I've got a few important things to talk about today. First of all, an update on COVID-19. Great news for Queensland, and that is we are left with just 6 active cases in Queensland, and all of them are hospitalised. So there is no known cases in the community at this time, which is a really stark contrast to a lot of places around the world. So just to put that in perspective, today the United States clicked over to 100,000 deaths as a result of COVID-19 and 1.7 million cases. Now, at the same time when we have people calling for, quick lifting of restrictions and talking about, we need to go back to normal, we just need to stop and think how well we are doing here and how safe we are compared to other places in the world, and we would not be in that position would it not for the way in which the government has responded, and in Queensland protecting us through the health guidelines, closing of borders, and all of the restrictions that were put in place, we are actually lifting our restrictions very quickly in comparison to some places. Some people are comparing us to other parts of the world, but we need to remember other parts of the world were in this earlier than us. They had their lockdowns earlier than us. They had more tighter restrictions than us. And now we're in a position where already our economy is starting to come out of the sharp downturn as a result of COVID-19. So, just like we do a lot of times, we forget history and start focusing on now and back to what we were thinking like prior COVID-19, and that is, how do I satisfy myself now? And I think we need to just stop and think again about, how we get to the position, why we are so lucky here in Queensland and in Australia, and maybe just be a bit patient to make sure that the future for not just ourselves but for our children is a lot more safer and a lot more predictable and a lot more rewarding. So let's just keep those things in perspective. A couple of other important things I want to talk about today, and the first one is domestic violence. So this is Domestic Violence Prevention Month, and I hear a lot of comments about overseas countries, other religions and different cultures and how they treat women. Women don't have schooling, they don't have the right to vote in some places, they can't go out to different places. And it's easy to throw stones, it's easy to make comment about others, but sometimes you need to look in the mirror, and it's not a good picture here in Australia. One woman dies from domestic violence every 9 days, and one man dies from a partner, at the hands of their partner, once every 28 days. Now, that is just not good any which way you look at that. So we do need to think about, one is it's not okay for domestic violence. Now, domestic violence could be the form of physical, psychological or sexual abuse, but we need to look at that whole continuum. Like, that is at one end, and so if we are going to reduce the top end where people are murdering their partner, we need to go back to the other end as to what is acceptable in society. So, if it's a bigger leap to get there, then we'll have less of it. But at the moment, there is a lot of disrespect for women in our community. How we talk about women, what we sort of talk about in terms of what their role is. We still make jokes about, leaving the cleaning and washing up and ironing and all that sort of stuff to them and what their role is. We often have commercials and media and marketing demeaning women in different ways. So when you allow a culture to develop where you don't have a common message about being respectful towards women, then it's not as big a leap to go to the other end, which leads to verbal, physical, sexual abuse. So we really need to start at the lower end and think about how do we talk about to women? How do we depict women in different roles in terms of jokes and things like that, and what is acceptable? Because what we really want to do is start at the point where we say we need to make sure we are respectful in our language, our comments, and all of the narrative that goes with that, so that we don't get to a point where, oh, it's okay to make jokes, it's okay to make fun of, it's okay to put them down, it's okay to stereotype them in this particular way, which means, from that point, when you're making jokes and stereotyping, then the next step, which is not too far from that, is verbal abuse. And then you can, people say, oh, he just said this, or he just, that was just a comment and it's a one-off. And then you say, oh, and then it goes into, oh, you may have hit her once or something like that. So little steps become acceptable when you don't make sure that you've got a high standard at the start. So this month, I think, is not just about protecting women, getting reports about that, helping the victims, which we must do. But the main thing we really need to think about is how we talk. And I don't think enough of us are talking about using respectful language. One of the things that we talked about as a community here at Tallawong right through the lockdown and the restrictions was about kindness, it was about empathy, and it was about being grateful and appreciative. And I think we need to make sure we continue that and even grow that to make sure that we, like I said, I think a few times, if mum does something for the kids or the family, that we make sure that we say thank you. We say, and don't take those things for granted. Just because mum is the one making the lunches every day, that's an expectation that that's what you do all the time. How about we make sure we can make a point every day saying, hey mum, thanks for making my lunch for me. Now, for some men, that's a difficult thing. They say, well, I don't want to say thank you every day. And, I don't want to get into that conversation, but I think it'd be a lot easier for a lot of us men and dads to say to the kids, hey, make sure you thank your mother, for this, so that they see that we are asking them to be respectful to women as part of that process. And I think that's where we can actually make a start this month in preventing domestic violence in our community. I also want to talk in conjunction with domestic violence about, physical and sexual abuse of children. And I know that's another topic that is not talked about a lot, although it's been a lot more in the media since there was a lot of issues with the clergy and other cases with the church around sexual assault against children. One of the groups that works with our school, which is Act for Kids, is a really good organisation, and they actually fund a therapist who works with children who have experienced either violence in the home or any sort of abuse. So I do want to thank the Act for Kids organisation, and I think we will have a link from our Facebook page to the Act for Kids, just so that you can have a look at some of the resources and what they do. It's important to have organisations like that which are looking out for the kids and providing support for families, schools like ours, to support children who have experienced trauma and violence or abuse, to help them build a foundation so that in future life they're not impacted as much or disadvantaged as much as a result of the negative experiences they've had as children. So thanks a lot to Act for Kids, and we really appreciate the support you give to the children and families in our community. We also have for families, Talking Families, and that probably would have been a lot more of a higher profile already had it not been for some of the restrictions around COVID-19. But in the coming months, you will hear a lot more about Act for Kids and Talking Families within our school, and providing support to children and families in helping you and the children to build a future where kids can experience far more happiness and success in their future lives. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you again tomorrow for the last of my daily updates, because remember, from next week we are going to go to weekly updates from Monday. Oh, almost forgot. One very last, very, very, very important message, and that is, go the Cowboys!